Hello everyone, welcome to class. Today we are going to discuss about ecosystem. Ecosystem, it's a basically you can say it's a revision class in one shot. Okay, so if we discuss about ecosystem, what are the things we are going to cover up under ecosystem? First, we will discuss about the level of organization of the ecosystem, or you can write organization level. Organization level means what we are focusing. First, a individual. What is individual? Any single organism, we call it individual, right? So group of similar individuals which has the compatibility for breeding, we call it population, right? Two or more different population will form community, and this then will form your entire ecosystem. We will see this. I'm just giving you an outline what we are going to see in this session, right? Then we will see the components of ecosystem. What are the components of ecosystem? If we say components, it is of two types: biotic and abiotic component. Biotic and abiotic component. Then we will discuss about types of ecosystem. Under types, there are two types of types. One is natural, which is gifted by nature. Another is anthropogenic. Anthropogenic, we also call it man-made. We also call it man-made, right? And then fourth, we are going to discuss about the function of ecosystem. We are also going to discuss the function of ecosystem. What are the functions of ecosystem? Productivity. Entire productivity, entire you can say universe is running because of the producers, right? We need to focus on productivity. Then energy flow, and how energy is transferred from one organism to another. Nutrient cycling. Nutrient cycling. Then fourth one is your decomposition. Fourth one is decomposition. Then we will discuss about ecological succession. Ecological successions. So this is a brief outline we are going to cover up in this session. So first we will be focusing on the organization level. So if we discuss organization level, see here. What is organization level or level of organization? So if we talk about organization, say first what is present? First we always speak about individual, right? Individual of any species, right? Then when this individual forms a group where they can reproduce, where breeding is possible, we call it population, right? And when two or more populations group together, we call it community. And this community with non-living objects, community with non-living objects, we call it ecosystem. What we call it ecosystem. So for further clarification, let me draw a diagram here. Say this is an individual. Now we call it what? Individual, right? And when this individual is able to reproduce, this is a male, this is female, when there is a compatibility of breeding, right? When they are reproduced and they produces their offspring, right? They produces their offspring. Here you see it contains more than two individuals, right? So we call it population. What we call it population. So population has no boundaries. See, you can also call population two or more individuals. Whenever you can see, you call it as a population. It has no boundary that it needs this and this. All right, now this, you see, this human population, this is a human population, this is a human population. This human population in nature, this is one population, right? let me mark this. This is one population, right? Now there is say another organism or another species present, which we call plant. This is also a population of plants. Yes, in an area it is a population of plants. Then you will see the population of birds. These are birds, right? And here you see it is a, here you can see the population of two or more species, and we call this what? We call this community, because here more than two types of species population is present, so we call it community. Now when these communities, suppose if I add some non-living things to this community, say I have added mountains. Yes, these are mountains, right? Plus water, plus oxygen or gas. This is the area, and here if you see this is a what? Human population. Yes, this is human population. Then this is plant population again. This is plant population, and this is crows population, right? So here you see this is what we call community. Why we call it community? Because here living, it's a combination of living and non-living, mountain, water, oxygen, gas, non-living things. So that is what is the level of organization of the ecosystem, right? Next we will discuss the components of ecosystem. Components of Next we will see the components of ecosystem. So if we talk about the components of ecosystem, basically it is of, the component present is of two types. One is biotic, another is abiotic, right? Say biotic component and abiotic component. Biotic component is what? It is a living thing that is present. Biotic components means all living, and abiotic is non-living thing. Non-living. Now if you see biotic component, this biotic component is of three types. What are the three types? Producers, consumers, and decomposers. What are producers? That they are also known as autotrophs. Producers are also known as autotrophs. Consumers are also known as heterotrophs. Heterotrophs. And decomposers are also known as saprotrophs. Saprotrophs. This consumer, if we divide, it can be divided into primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and quaternary consumer. Primary consumers we can also term as herbivores. Primary consumer, let me change the ink of the pen so that it becomes clear for you all. Primary consumer can also be termed as herbivores. Secondary consumers, we can call it primary carnivores, because they are the first carnivore organism, right? We can also call it primary carnivore, secondary carnivore, or large carnivore. You can also call it large carnivore, right? Or this quaternary, we can also call it omnivores. That's all about the biotic component. Now if you focus on the non-biotic component, if you see the, let me change the color of the, if you focus on non-biotic, it is of two types. What are the two types? Non-biotic, climatic and edaphic factor. Edaphic basically the soil, surface. It includes soil, what type of soil, clay, loamy, sandy, right? So this we'll see. So climatic is what? Climatic factor, under it the climate, weather, rain, condition, wind, right? Light, temperature, light, temperature, this will come. Under, you can say edaphic factors, what we are going to see, we'll see soil, yes, pH, minerals, topography. Topography means what? Surface. Whether it is plain, whether it is valley, the surface of the particular area. Whether it is plain surface, valley, hills, or what. So that is what we call the topography. Right? So this is all about the structure of ecosystem. Next, we are going to see the types of ecosystem. Types of ecosystem. If we discuss the types of ecosystem, first, two types of ecosystem. One is aquatic and other is terrestrial ecosystem. Right? Under aquatic, we have lentic, lotic, and under aquatic, let me write it here, we have lentic, lotic, and wetlands, right? And under terrestrial ecosystem, we have forest ecosystem, we have forest ecosystems, then grassland ecosystem, forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystems, then we have mountain ecosystems, right? Then we have desert ecosystem. So this is on the basis of aquatic and terrestrial. Another we can differentiate on the basis of natural and man-made. If we talk about natural, what does it include? Natural, forest, right? Grassland, those will come under what? Natural ecosystem. Aquatic. But if we talk about man-made, agricultural land, then aquarium. If you focus on water ecosystem, then aquarium. So these are all man-made ecosystem. Coming to the functions of ecosystem. When we discuss about the functions of ecosystem, there are four important functions. First is the energy flow. Energy flow. Second is the productivity. Third, decomposition. And fourth one is the nutrient cycling. Now we will see each one of this. So we'll discuss now energy flow. So you all know sun is the ultimate source of energy, right? So this is sun here. This sun rays falls on earth. So out of 100%, less than 50% will be utilized by plants for photosynthesis. That is what we call PAR, photosynthetic active radiation, right? So this green plants, let me draw the green plants here. These green plants will absorb sun rays, which is less than 50% of total sun rays, and they will utilize this and they will produce glucose and oxygen, or you can say they will produce food. on which are dependent large number of organisms, say for example grasshopper, eaten up by frog, eaten up by snake, eaten up by eagle, right? So this is a food chain on which the organisms are dependent on one another for energy. So if you say this food chain, this grasshopper, frog, snake, eagle, they are dependent on green plant for food, so they are also known as consumers or heterotroph, right? And here you see the light energy from the sun. The light energy from sun is converted to chemical energy, by green plants, so they are also known as autotroph or producers. Right? Now this is at one point of time what happened, this organism will die. Yes, when they die, the biomass or the minerals which is present in their body has to be revert back to the nature, has to be given back to the nature. So here come the role of decomposers. We also call them saprotrophs. What we call them? Saprotrophs, right? So what they do, they just act on the dead bodies, and they acts on dead and decaying bodies and releases minerals back to the plant and soil. Clear? So this is the cycle of which keeps on happening. If plants stop producing food, then entire flow will be stopped. Got it? So because this is only the plant which is capturing the sunlight and is getting converted the sunlight into chemical energy, on which are dependent some other organisms which we call them consumers. So you see here, if we define this interdependency of organisms on one another, what we call it food chain. And each of these organisms that participate in the food chain, we call them trophic level. What we call? We call them trophic level. So what is trophic level? Basically, each organism of the food chain, we call the trophic level. So this is trophic level 1, trophic level 2, trophic level 3, trophic level 4, trophic level 5, right? So these are the trophic level. Now if you see if we define food chain, now here if we define food chain, there are two types of food chain. One is grazing food chain, another is detrivore food chain. So if you see two types of food chain, one we call it, let me write it here, one we call it grazing food chain. So which is the grazing food chain? The one which started from the green plants, we call it grazing food chain. Another one is the detritus food chain. So what is detritus food chain? You see these organisms, you see the green plants, this is a dead and dried leaves. So these are green plants, dead and dried leaves. Yes, this grasshopper also will die, plus their ficus. Yes, so this, what happened to this? See, all the died bodies, all the dead bodies, right, and all the, you can say, dried leaves, all those excretory materials of the organisms, who will act on that? They will be acted upon by decomposers, right? And that food chain we call the detrivore food chain. That means the chain which starts from dead and decaying organic matter, dead and dry, we call it detrivore. Let me explain it here. So what exactly is happening? If this is a sun right? These sun rays will be absorbed. These sun rays will be absorbed by green plants. PAR will be absorbed by green plants, and their dependents, say for example, grasshopper, frog, snake, eagle, right? So here it is absorbing less than 50% photosynthetic active radiation, right? So what is basically happening here? This one we call it producer, and this one we call it consumers, right? And when they die, so here you see this is a food chain which is starting from the green plant. So this is what we call it grazing food chain. This is what we call it grazing food chain. Now at one point of time, what will happen? The dried leaves from these plants will fall down. Dried leaves, yes, for grasshopper, that plus ficus, yes. For frog also, when it die, it has got its dead material and also its excretory materials. For eagle, for snake also, ficus plus dead. So who will act on this materials? There are certain organisms that act on this material. We named it as bacteria, fungi, and the food chain which start from this dead and decaying organic matter, we call it detritivore food chain. We call it what? Detritivore food chain. Clear? Yes. So these are the types of food chain. Let me clear you another one, 10% law. So what is 10% law? One scientist called Lindemann proposed this law. What is that? Is, see here, if this is a green plant, grass, eaten up by grasshopper, eaten up by frog, eaten up by snake, eaten up by eagle. Now what exactly is happening? According to this, only 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next trophic level. So here also 10% of energy, 10% of energy, 10% of energy is transferred. Got it? And remaining 90% of energy is eliminated out in the form of heat. Is eliminated, remaining 90% of energy is eliminated in the form of heat, right? So from one organism, you see, if green plants prepare food, only 10% will be passed to the grasshopper, right? And 10% of grasshopper will be transferred to frog, 10% of frog will be transferred to snake, and 10% of snake will be transferred to eagle. So I can say that the organisms which occupy the topmost level in the food chain, they are more prone for extinction. Why? Because they are getting very less energy, and also they are less in number, right? Yes. So that's all about energy flow. So here we will discuss about productivity. अगर हम productivity की बात करते हैं, so this productivity is divided into two types: primary productivity and secondary productivity. Now what is primary productivity? See, this is sun. This sunlight will be absorbed by green plants. Yes, this sunlight will be absorbed by green plants, and what it will do, it will produce is glucose, right? And this glucose, if you see, this glucose, by utilizing this glucose, the plant will increase in height, or it increases its biomass, yes or no? So what the plant has done, plant has used this light energy, undergo photosynthesis and produced glucose, and this glucose, the plant have used some of this glucose to increase its biomass. Yes, so this is what we call primary productivity. Primary productivity always deals with first trophic level, always deals with the first trophic level. See, basically if we define primary productivity, it is rate of primary productivity. If we define, it is the rate of increase in rate of primary production per unit area. Per unit area is what primary productivity. Now what is primary production? What is primary production? Increase biomass at T1 trophic level. That means this plant, it produces glucose, right? After utilizing glucose, how much it grows, how much biomass has increased, right? That is what we call primary production. Per unit area, the increase in biomass per unit area, increase in biomass per unit area, we call it primary production. We call it what? Primary production. And this primary production, when we define with time, we call it primary productivity. Am I clear? So what is primary production? Let me tell you once again. See, the plants will utilize this sunlight and produces glucose, right? This glucose, some amount plant will use to increase in biomass. Yes, the increase in biomass per unit area is what we call primary production. Now what is primary productivity? Primary productivity is nothing but primary production per unit time. Means if this plant has, say, 50 kg, suppose this plant is weighted 50 kg, after 50 years, the growth of plant is, say, suppose 120 kg. So here this is called primary productivity. Means with time, this has 120 minus 50 is how much? So with time, how much the net gain the plant has done, net increase in biomass with time, we call it primary productivity. Clear? And what is secondary productivity? Secondary productivity is what? The plant, suppose this is sun again, this sun will be utilized by green plants to produce food. Now this glucose, if we divide in two types, see this glucose, whatever is produced, the plants will utilize something by themselves, and next other animals are dependent on this glucose. Yes, and this is where the T2 level exists. So secondary productivity is basically increase in biomass per unit area, rate of increase in biomass per unit area at T2 level. We call it secondary productivity. Am I clear? So if we define it again, what is primary productivity, what is secondary productivity? Let me show you here. If this is a sun, right, this sunlight will be utilized by green plants, yes or no? This sunlight will be utilized by green plants, and what they do, they will produce glucose. They will produce what? Glucose, right? And this glucose, what it will do, this glucose, if you see, it will, some amount of glucose will be utilized by plants, yes, and some will go to consumers like grasshopper, right, frog, snake, eagle, or you can say some will go to deer, lion, isn't it? Let me rub this. So it will go to this. So here you see, if you see, the some amount of glucose will be utilized by plants to increase its biomass, Yes or no? And some will be eaten up by consumers. Some will be utilized by plants to grow, or you can see for respiration you can write, and some will be utilized for it by the consumers, isn't it? So the one which is utilized by plant, we call the, say the plant will utilize glucose and it will grow in bigger in size, so that increase in biomass, per unit area is what? Primary production. Am I clear what is primary production? So increase in biomass, this is T1 and this is T2, T3, T4, T5. This is what called primary production. Am I clear what is primary production? Now what is primary productivity? Primary productivity is what? Rate of primary production. Rate of primary production means क्या है? See, if this is a plant, say it is weighing 50 kg, right? After 50 years, say the increase of biomass is 200 kg. So what we have seen, this is increase in biomass with respect to time. With respect to what? Time. We call that primary productivity. Clear? This is what is a primary productivity. Now if we define secondary productivity, this utilization of glucose by consumers, they will utilize this glucose and increase in biomass per unit area with respect to time. Area, rate of, you can write rate of increase of biomass per unit area at T2. What we call it? We call it secondary productivity. We call it what? Secondary productivity. Am I clear? Yes. And here you see the amount of glucose the plant synthesize. Here the plant is producing glucose. Suppose the plant is producing say 2000 kg of glucose. So this is the entire amount produced by plants. We call it GPP. That means gross primary productivity. Clear? Gross primary productivity. Now out of all the glucose the plants produce, some plants will utilize for respiration for its own purpose, for its own glucose metabolism, or for its own aerobic respiration. The plants will utilize glucose, so that what we call respiration. Now if we subtract gross from total glucose, the energy which plants use for its own growth, if we minus that, what is left over is available for consumers. That means if GPP minus respiration is what? NPP, net primary productivity, and net primary productivity is available to other organisms. Am I clear? Net primary productivity is what is available to other organisms. So this is what? Net primary productivity. Clear? So what we have seen is, see, we have seen sunlight will be utilized by plants. What plants will do? It will produce glucose. It will produce glucose. Now this glucose, suppose this is the total glucose produced, right? Now this total glucose, what will happen to this total glucose? It will divide into two types. How many types? Two types. What is two types? The some amount of glucose will be utilized by plants for respiration. Respiration by plants, and some will be available to consumers. That means other organisms. Other organisms dependent on plant. Other organisms dependent on plants. So what will you see? This total glucose which is produced, this total glucose, we call it gross primary productivity, GPP. Gross primary productivity. Now out of gross primary productivity, if we minus, this is what we call energy or glucose utilized for respiration. So if you minus from total glucose, if you minus respiration, is what available? NPP, that is net primary productivity. And this is what is available to consumers. Am I clear? This energy what is available to consumers. Clear? So total glucose which is formed, we call the primary productivity. So here total glucose produced, we call the GPP, right? And the plants, the energy utilized by plants for respiration, if you say for respiration the plants will utilize some amount of energy, we call it respiration, we define it with R. Now this subtract, if you minus that, what is available is what? Net, and that is what? GPP minus R. And this net primary productivity is what is available to consumers. Clear, everyone? Yes, this is what is the primary production and secondary production. Now if we discuss the ocean productivity, this is what, if we discuss ocean productivity. So basically what is happening, we all know that 70% or 70% of Earth's space is occupied by ocean, right? But if we compare the productivity, always land productivity is more, land, or you can say terrestrial productivity is high. Terrestrial productivity is always high than ocean. Why is it so? So why the terrestrial productivity is always high than ocean? This is because sunlight do not penetrate much into the ocean. This is because, why? Sunlight, because of organisms on the surface of water, sunlight cannot penetrate more deeper. Sunlight cannot penetrate deep down the sea. That's why there is a deficiency of productivity. And second is what? There is nutrient deficiency. Deficiency of nutrients inside the sea. Deficiency of nutrients inside ocean or sea. That's why productivity of terrestrial is always high than ocean. Productivity of terrestrial is always high than ocean. Clear? Yes. So this is all about productivity. Next we are going to see decomposition. So what is decomposition? Decomposition. We are trying to understand the mechanism of decomposition. What exactly happens if this is a, say, decomposition is what? Degradation of dead and decaying organic matter. The decomposition is what? Decomposition means what? Dead organic matter. Dead and decaying organic matter, right? Like feces, some pronounce it feces also, dead bodies. Yes. So this is when they undergo decomposition. We call it, when we when the body, when there is a bacteria, fungus act on this dead organic matter, they releases minerals, and this process we call it decomposition, right? So to understand decomposition, see, let me draw here a dry leaf or plant. Say, let me draw here dried plant or leaves, right, or dead bodies. So what will happen now? These are dried leaves and dead bodies. So what will happen? Say, let me draw a leaf here so that it becomes very clear. This is a dried leaf, right? Or you can say dried plant, right? So this is what will happen. There are organisms which will act on this and will break down this product. What they will do? Suppose organisms like earthworm, break down the dead organic matter into organisms like what? Organisms like earthworm break down the dead organic matter into small or micro pieces. Yes or no? And this process, what we call? This process we call it fragmentation. What we call this process? We call it fragmentation. So what will you see here in fragmentation? You will see some green leaves. See, this green leaves is broken down into this smaller part, which is what we call fragmentation. Now during this fragmentation, what happened? Let me tell you. During this fragmentation, what will happen? Some amount of minerals which is present here, in some amount of minerals which is present here will undergo what? These minerals, these soluble minerals, water soluble minerals will remove from this. Yes, this you can say, let me write here, soluble, water soluble minerals will be out from this, will be out from these pieces, from these fragmentation pieces, and they will go deep down the soil. So here this let me write it properly. Some water soluble minerals, let me write it, some water soluble minerals will be removed or move down the soil, and this process what we call, and this process we call it leaching. Leaching is basically what? This process what we call it leaching. Means all the water after fragmentation, what happened? Dead and decaying organic matter what is present, it will be broken down into small pieces. After broken down, those which are water soluble minerals, if present any, it will be removed or it will move down the soil, and this process of removing out of water soluble minerals we call it leaching. What we call it leaching. Am I clear? Yes. After leaching is what? Now, after leaching, what will happen? These structures, these organisms or these small pieces, they will be further broken down into very tiny pieces like this. And this is done by, who will do this? This is done by bacteria and fungus. What? Mainly bacteria and fungus. That means this process we call the breakdown of what? Breakdown of complex substances into simpler part. Breakdown of complex substances into simpler ones are called what? Are catabolism. So what is catabolism? Catabolism is nothing but breakdown of complex substances into simplest one. We call it catabolism. And who will do that? This will be done by bacteria and fungus. Here also bacteria and fungus will come. Here also earthworm will come, bacteria will come, yes, fungus will come, yes, those all, they will come here also. Those all, what it will do, they will cover already micro pieces, they will again convert into a very fine substances or simpler substances, and that is what we call it catabolism. Now after some time you will see these substances will turn into a very what? Dark compound, into a very, you can say, dark compound, converted to dark. This, you can say, this is getting converted to what? Dark amorphous solid. This entire one converted into dark amorphous solid called humus. called humus. All right, and this process of formation of humus, what we call this process of formation of humus, we called it humification. This is a process of formation of humus. This process of formation of humus, we call it humification. After some time, what will you observe from this humus? From this humus, what will happen? Minerals, all minerals present in the humus slowly released out into the environment, slowly released out into the environment. And this process, what we call this process of releasing mineral out from the out from the humus, we call it mineralization. What we call? We call it mineralization. Clear? This is all about decomposition. So all the detrivores, basically, or the decomposition of that organic matter by detrivores. Who will perform this? This is mainly done by detrivores or decomposers. So what they will do? Decomposition of that organic matter. So dried plant, see, I'm once again telling, if in environment all the dead bodies, all the dried plant leaves which get accumulated, this dead bodies, dried plant, the detritus, you can say, those dead bodies are acted upon by earthworm, bacteria, fungus. They break down this body into small pieces, or leaves into smaller pieces, or dead substances into smaller pieces, and we call that process fragmentation. Right? After fragmentation, what happened? Whatever the soluble minerals present in this, it will be released out, or it will move down the soil, all water soluble minerals. And this process of releasing out water soluble minerals, we call it leaching. Right? After leaching, what will happen? This compound is further broken down into simplest one by bacteria and fungus, and this process of breaking down of complex substances into finer or simplest one, we call it catabolism. Right? And after catabolism, what will happen? These substances, powdered one, they, after some time, you will see they turns to dark amorphous solid, we call it humus. And here it leads to the formation of humus, so we call this process humification. After humification, you see all the minerals which is present here are slowly released into the environment. And this process of removing minerals from the humus, we call it what? We call it what? Mineralization. We call it what? Mineralization. So here, what we have noted this cycling of nutrients. Cycling of minerals. So minerals, flow of minerals, you can say, also flow of minerals. How it is moving, you see, in the environment. This is what we call what? Flow of minerals. Right? Now, if we see the decomposition is affected on some criteria, the rate of decomposition is dependent on certain factors. For example, say rate of decomposition is faster. Faster decomposition takes place when in the bodies, when you see rate of decomposition increases when there is high moisture. When there is high moisture, high temperature, yes, high nitrogen rich compounds. High nitrogen compounds. Right? And there are also certain factors where there is decrease in decomposition. How is the decrease in decomposition takes place? Rate of decrease in decomposition happens when there is high chitin and high lignin present. This is where the rate of decomposition is dependent. Clear? So with this, we are done with the decomposition. Next, we will see energy flow. Ecological pyramid. What is ecological pyramid? Ecological pyramid is nothing but graphical representation of food chain. Graphical representation of food chain. We call it ecological pyramid. So if you see, if we define, say this is grass, let me draw it here. Grass eaten up by deer, eaten up by lion, right? So what we call this T1, T2 and T3. When we do the graphical representation of this food chain, we call it ecological pyramid. So basically ecological pyramid is of 3 types. How many types? 3 types. What are the 3 types of ecological pyramids? Yes, the 3 types of ecological pyramids are pyramid of number, then pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. Right? Now if we talk about pyramid of number, what is pyramid of number? Say for example, amount of grass is always high. If you see a field, if this is a field, these all are grass, and here you will see a deer. Say this is a deer, right? So amount of, when there is a number of grasses is always high, we are getting energy from plants, so number of grasses is high, then number of herbivores, then number of carnivore, right? So this, when we represent the pyramid on the basis of number of organisms involved, on the basis of you can say graphical representation on the basis of number of individuals involved in T1, T2, T3, we call it pyramid of number. And normally this pyramid of number is upright. Is what? Upright. Upright means what? How it looks like upright? It means it's this, right? Upright. But there is certain exception. So exception arises when? Let me tell you the case of exception. If this is a plant here, say this is a tree here. So in this tree, we don't know how many number of insects are present. Yes or no? In this tree will present insects. The number of insects is high if we consider there is only one tree. But in that one tree, the number of insects is high, or there may be many number of insects. Yes or no? And there will be many birds which will be eating the insects. But level of bird will be less than insects. So this is a producer. Yes or no? This is a tree in this. But here, more than trees is the number of insects. Now, if we compare the birds which is eating on this insect is quite less. So this is what we call what? Spindle shift. And this is exception. Spindle shift. And this is the exception in the pyramid of number. If we talk about pyramid of biomass, again, if we talk about pyramid of biomass, what is pyramid of biomass? It is always upright. Pyramid of biomass means what? Increase in biomass formation. Yes. Pyramid of biomass is always upright for terrestrial organism. Upright for terrestrial. You see, plants, whatever the biomass of plants, it is less than the deer, right? Herbivore, sorry, deer, right? So here the pyramid goes upright like this. But if we talk about ocean, here again exception comes for ocean. Here exception comes for ocean. So what happened in ocean? In ocean, the pyramid is inverted. Pyramid is inverted. This is what we call inverted. Pyramid is ulta, inverted. Clear? This is what is the pyramid. In case of ocean, it is what? It is inverted. Am I clear why? It is inverted, right? Because in oceans, what happened? The number of phytoplankton is less compared to what? Zooplankton. Number of phytoplankton is less than zooplankton. Why? Because see, if phytoplanktons undergo photosynthesis, it will take sunlight and it will increase its biomass. Whatever biomass it has increased, that zooplankton will come and eat this. Clear? So here in ocean, it is an exception case. Pyramid of energy, it is always upright. Let me tell you, the pyramid of energy is always upright, because energy flow always upright always. Why? Because flow of energy is unidirectional. Flow of energy is unidirectional, because flow of energy is what? Unidirectional, right? That's why it is pyramid of energy is always upright. And always, if you see, this is grass, deer, lion, energy always flow from this, from grass to deer, deer to lion, and 10% of energy flows, right? That's why we call pyramid of energy as always what? Upright, right? Next, ecological succession. Ecological succession. So what is ecological succession? With time, changes in an area with respect to time, we call it ecological succession. Suppose यहाँ पे there are present certain water bodies here. Say water bodies कुछ present है यहाँ, and यहाँ भी कुछ suppose rocks and water bodies. So with time क्या होगा? With time they will change into forest area, or they will change into, you can say this is forest, plant. Yes, with time you see water bodies also got converted to land, rock also got converted to forest area, right? So with time, when these changes takes place, we call this ecological succession. What do we call this? We call this ecological succession. Up, if you see here, this is what? This is water bodies, water wet areas, right? This is wet areas, yes or no? So it is also known as what? It is also known as hydric, and this succession we call the hydric succession. This succession, what we call? We call it hydric succession. And this succession rocks, what we call it? Rocks, we call the Jerac succession. And this is called dry area, so we call the xeric state, xeric condition. Xeric means what? It means dry. Here, so this is what is a ecological succession. With time, change in a particular area, with time we call the ecological succession. So if we see water bodies, say this is water bodies here. So water bodies present here. With time, what will happen? Slowly, you might see, slowly you will see this water bodies getting converted to, you will see this water bodies. What will happen? Yes, in these water bodies, phytoplankton, small photosynthetic organism present on the oceans. Phytoplankton will start coming, will start developing in this water body. Now after phytoplankton, what will come? Rooted submerged. I will tell you what is that. Rooted submerged. Then what will come? Rooted free floating. Rooted free floating. Then comes your reed swamp stage. Reed swamp. Then comes your marsh meadow. Marsh meadow. Then scrub and forest. Small tree. Small tree. And then this will change into forest. Right. So if we talk about phytoplankton, what it is, these are what is phytoplankton? Let me tell you, these are small organisms which are present on the sea, right? And if I say root submerged organism means what? If this is a water body, those which is submerged deep, this is what we call root submerged. They have root and they are submerged, right? So if this is a bucket, say this is a bucket of water, what is root submerged? These are these organisms. It is root submerged. Then with root submerged will change into rooted free floating. Rooted free floating means if this is a bucket, so rooted free floating means it will come like this. They are floating on the surface of water. See, they are floating on the surface of water. Floating on the surface of water. Right, and they are under the water. Under water. And they are free floating. They are what? Floating. Clear? Now after some time you will see reed swamp stage. Reed swamp stage means what? You will see long bamboos, long tall trees or long bamboo kind of thing. Reed swamp. Then marsh meadow. Marsh meadow is muddy area with long grass. Like this, and here you will see long, it's tall plants, right? Then develops shrub, small trees, and this will change into forest, right? So these are the development stages that water bodies go through to change into a forest area, right? So here one thing let me tell you, so this is the first living organism that exists on this water body, yes or no? So we call this pioneer. What we call this? We call this pioneer. Why pioneer? Because this is the first living organisms. This is what? First living organism. So we called it what? We called it pioneer. And this is the end, or this is what we call it climax community. What we call it climax community, right? And in between this, if you see, this is in between. These are stages, yes or no? Each of this we call it series. Or and each of this what we call serial stage. What we call it serial stage. Clear? Yes. So this is what is the succession in the water body or plant, how it is taking place, right? Now if we talk about, say one more thing here, so what is happening here? Initially it was only water body, then phytoplankton started appearing here. So we call, as this is the first organism which starts appearing in the water body, we call them phytoplankton, right? After phytoplankton, rooted submerged plants, then rooted free floating, then reed swamp, marsh meadow, scrub, and dhire dhire it will change into the forest area. Now if we see for these rocks, see, if we talk about rocks, suppose this is a rocks, what will happen here? These rocks will be what? Will be what? Occupied by lichens. Now these lichens, after lichens, mosses. After mosses, who will come? Grasses, annual grasses, right? Annual grasses, bryophytes, small plants, yes or no? Then shrubs. Yes, so dhire dhire it will again change to the land area. So this modification, since it is takes place in a dry xeric condition, yes or no, xeric state, so we call this succession. What we call this succession? Xeric succession. And here also this is the first organism. This is what? This is the first organism. So we call this pioneer. And this is, we call it what? Or forest, we call here, we call it climax. Forest changes into trees. I mean, you can wait. This will change into forest, and this will be your climax community. Clear? And these all stages we call serial stage. Each of these stages we call it what? Serial stage. And entire this concept we call it serial. Clear? So this is what is the succession. Now if we talk about ecological succession, it is of two types. If we talk about ecological succession, it is of two types. What are the two types? One we call it primary succession and secondary. Primary and secondary. So what is primary succession? Yes, succession, you can say primary succession as succession which occurs in an area where no life existed. Primary succession occurs in an area where no life existed before. But what is secondary succession? It occurs in area which has lost its biodiversity, due to some natural calamities, like flood, cyclone. Yes, so there are two types of succession. One we call the primary succession, another we call it secondary succession. So what is primary succession? This is basically occurs in an area where no life existed before. And if we talk about secondary succession is what? It is basically the succession, it basically takes place in an area where there was a loss in biodiversity due to some natural calamities like what? Like floods, cyclone, etc. Clear? Now, next we will discuss about biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycle. So if we say biogeochemical cycle, it is basically what? It comes from two words. Bio, life, geo, earth. Chemical basically means what? Nutrients. So if we define biogeochemical cycle, it means what? It mainly refers to the movement of nutrients, and other elements, between biotic and abiotic factors. We call it biogeochemical cycle. Bio means biosphere, geo means geological component, and chemical means element, nutrients. Got it? So if we talk about biogeochemical cycle, the earth obtains, see, did you get my point? What is biogeochemical cycle? It refers to the movement of nutrients and other elements between biotic and abiotic factor. The earth obtains energy from the sun, which is radiated back as heat. Rest all other elements are present in a closed system. So here the major elements, I wrote elements. The major elements which is include is what? Is your carbon, hydrogen, then nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, phosphorus. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. So if we talk about biogeochemical cycle, it is of two types. How many types? Two types. What are the two types of biogeochemical cycle? One we call the gaseous cycle. What? Gaseous cycle. What do you mean by gaseous cycle? Another we call it sedimentary cycle. Another we call it sedimentary cycle. Now what is gaseous cycle? Yes, gaseous cycle includes that. Gaseous cycles means what? Majority of them exist in gaseous form. In which form? In gaseous form. And that includes carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, water cycle, right? And sedimentary includes what? Sedimentary that are non-gaseous form, right? It includes sulfur, phosphorus, etc. We call it sedimentary cycle. Clear? Now if we discuss little bit about one cycle we'll be discussing here from gaseous and one from sedimentary cycle. So in this, let me discuss the gaseous cycle first. We will discuss here the carbon cycle. Okay, so if you see carbon cycle, this is a sunlight. This sunlight is utilized by green plants for what? For, can we write here? For photosynthesis. Yes or no? After photosynthesis, what will happen? At one point of time, these plants will undergo decay. These plants will undergo what? Decay. They die or death. Undergo decomposition. Yes or no? Yes or no? Undergo the decomposition. Yes. So here, can I write? Undergo decomposition and releases carbon. Here also, if you see, some animals which are dependent on green plants for food, these animals also excrete and releases what? Carbon dioxide in the environment. Yes or no? Yes. Now this decomposition undergo respiration. This decomposition, the decomposers who are taking part in decomposition, they also will respire, undergo respiration and releases carbon dioxide in the environment. Yes or no? This carbon dioxide is also being released from automobiles, factories. Yes, automobile factories, and this carbon dioxide is taken back by green plants for photosynthesis. Animal respiration also, carbon dioxide which comes out from the animal respiration, that also is taken up by what? Taken up by green plants for photosynthesis. Clear? So what basically is happening? Sunlight is, let me explain this one. This sunlight is absorbed by green plants, and what it do? It undergo photosynthesis, right? And after photosynthesis, what will happen? This plant may die sometime and it undergo decomposition. Who will carry out decomposition? Decomposers. So they also will undergo respiration, releases carbon dioxide. And the animals which is dependent on green plants for food, they also undergo respiration and releases carbon dioxide. How? By respiration. So this respiration, carbon dioxide which is eliminated out, is taken back by plants for photosynthesis. Clear? So this is a what? Carbon cycle. Next we will see phosphorus cycle. carbon cycle mainly exists in the form of gas. हम लोग सब every organism what exhale out carbon dioxide, so it is releasing directly in atmosphere in the form of gas. But this is not the case with the phosphorus. So in phosphorus, what will happen? The rocks will be there. Yes, this is a rock or minerals. Rock contains minerals, right? So this undergo weathering. What? Weathering, breaking, right? Now what will happen? After this, phosphate is released in soil. It is released in what? Soil. Clear? Now this soil, what will happen? Some of this soil will undergo during flood, it may run off, and half are utilized by producers. Half are utilized by producers, yes, for photosynthesis. Now from producers, this will go to consumers, yes or no? And these consumers, what will happen after death? After death, detritus or decomposers will undergo decomposition. So what will happen? It is released back into the soil. Here, so this is what is the phosphorus cycle. From rocks and minerals, after breaking, it releases phosphorus in the soil. This soil, there is a chance that soil may be because of runoff, it goes to runoff, or some may be uptaken by producers during their growth. In this undergo also let me tell you, this undergo, they absorb minerals from the soil, so that is taken up by plants for photosynthesis. Now these plants will give their food to consumers. This is how phosphorus also travels to consumer. Then when they die, these detritus will come to the role, they undergo decomposition, and they releases back phosphorus in the soil. Also these producers or consumers, litter forms, also elected upon by what? Decomposers. With this, we are done with the ecosystem at one shot. Next, we are going to start biodiversity. Thank you for watching. Take care.